So Hannah, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, has there ever been a period in your life where you were afraid of carbohydrates or you thought that they would contribute to weight gain? And if so, tell us a little bit about like your headspace, your mindset around carbohydrates.
Um, well, until like a year ago, I didn't know that fruit was a carb. So my fear of carbs, which has been all, I guess I've been with you for a year and a half. So 22 years of my life have been like scary pasta, bread, stuff, big Italian meals that would be just like binge party, go crazy, and put a ton of butter on it. Um, and it's freaking delicious. So that was also a bonus. And every diet in like Cosmo tells you to cut carbs, cut carbs, cut carbs, cut carbs. But then also it's like eat berries for breakfast, which is like makes zero sense because then you're eating carbs. Um, but I still find them scary when I don't have them under control because for me personally, they're the sneakiest little buggers out there and the easiest thing to come across for eating. Even just like snacking, like it's so easy. You can just go to Lemon Street and be like, I'm going to be so healthy today. And then you grab your berries and got a blast and you eat the whole cart and you're like, well, that was not helpful to anyone. But I think carb cycling though has been the number one way for me to actually understand carbs and how they affect my body. And the big loaf of bread just doesn't feel good if you're eating your carbs correctly, but the 40 grams, which is a giant ass handful of blueberries, is amazing and delicious, and you actually have the energy without the food baby. And then now also being gluten-free, I don't want the gluten-free toast at all.
Yeah, so you kind of have like a little bit of a different situation just in that this year you've discovered that you have a whole bunch of these sensitivities that we didn't realize you had before. So that kind of acted as a little bit of a setback because we had no idea what was going on. And you were frustrated because you had gotten great results and then your body was like, nah, I'm gonna throw you for a curveball. So tell us about, you mentioned carb cycling, which is an aggressive fat loss strategy. So just to give folks a little bit of a background, you worked really hard at the basics for a long period of time, right? So we worked on proteins and fats and carbs and veggies and getting like a well-balanced mixture of those at most meals, most of the time. And then we were like, okay, we're ready to go to the next level. So we tried carb cycling. What did that teach you? Like, how did that change your perspective about carbohydrates and your relationship with carbs?
Well, so it's through that I really, because obviously learning about fruit in the learning part, I was like, okay, yeah, they're carbs, but it wasn't until I actually did the carb cycling that I was like, oh shit, it actually is getting me through my workout. It is like sustaining me through the day. That I had to get creative with them also because I was only eating smart carbs. I wasn't having any like breads or anything. I was mostly having berries and sweet potatoes, and occasionally I'd make rice, but I have a problem with leftover rice that I still have to overcome. But it was all things that could be fresh. I had to get creative with making the whole foods delicious, but then also understanding that I can eat the carbs and not. I was losing weight, gaining muscle, feeling awesome while eating carbs smart and strategically, and it was like the best time of my life.
Yes. And I think, so you and I obviously have talked ad nauseum about the difference between like smart carbs and we'll call them simple carbs or less smart carbs. And I think a lot of people get tripped up with like carbs, they're all the same thing. And we know that they're not, because certain carbs, like some of the ones you mentioned, you know, whole grains, rice, quinoa, any type of like even sprouted grain bread, potatoes, fruit, things of that nature are going to give back to your body so much differently than something like a pastry, a pretzel, a cracker, a cookie, a candy bar. Like all those things are carbs too, but different from smart to simple. So you were having mostly smart carbs.
Yeah, only smart carbs and the occasional beer. But even the beer, I would work it into the carb cycling.
Yeah, you were being mindful of like all the carbs you were consuming and allowing that to influence your workouts. Do you think your workouts felt better when you were incorporating more smart carbs?
They were 10 times better.
Yeah.
Everything in my life is better.
And I think sometimes people don't realize, or maybe they're not aware, that carbs are our body's first source of energy. So when we're eating more carbs, our body can use that energy, and we don't need to be afraid of them. It's not like the enemy of fat loss. It's just, in what capacity am I eating them, and what kinds of carbs am I eating? So let's say you're talking to someone who's afraid of carbs, doesn't eat carbs, and is still not seeing the results that they want. What piece or two of advice would you give them, having had the experience that you've had with carbohydrates?
Um, well, I would probably inform them of what smart carbs are, because a lot of people don't know that some foods are carbs.
Yeah.
Um, and then try and have them focus on accepting those as carbs and then eating them as carbs, and because your plate is going to look different than what you're thinking about it. So when you're thinking you need all your food groups, it's going to look different if you're thinking about it in terms of smart carbs rather than your slice of bread or whatever as your carb. And then so I guess just, it seems like people need more insight into what actually a carb is rather than how do I deal with consuming them. And then once you know what it is, you can work on, oh, okay, I need this amount a day for my body. Let's eat that in blueberries rather than pretzels, cookies.
Yes, I think education is a big component. I was just talking to someone the other day, and she was telling me about her. I asked what she had for the day food journal, and she said, "Oh, well, at this meal, I had like some pasta and like a piece of garlic bread, and then I enjoyed some wine with it, and she had some veggies with it as well." But if you're not aware of what counts as a carbohydrate, you wouldn't understand that you're getting 3, 4, potentially 5 servings of carbs in one meal, where if you're not active, maybe you don't need that many, and it's not serving your goals quite as effectively as it could be.
Yeah, that just sounds really overwhelming in carb world.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be scary. There's a lot of information out there, so it's overwhelming for sure. Hannah, on a slightly different note, so we mentioned like you realized you had some food sensitivities this past year, and that threw us like for a major curveball, right? It was a major bump in the road. And I know that kind of forced us to put your fat loss goals on the back burner because we needed to put your health at the forefront of our focus. So for anyone who's struggling with like a setback of any kind, do you have any advice or wisdom for that person? Like how have you been like wrapping your brain around this part of your journey? Because fat loss was really important to you, and you were at an amazing place, and then life was like, throwing this in, see how you do with this challenge. What would you say to someone that's maybe struggling in a completely different way, perhaps, but still feeling like they're running into barriers?
Hindsight, like easier said than done, but like you will like get back on track, and the world is not ending. You're not in a like downward spiral in a tornado moving as fast as possible. You're just gonna hit the ground and go obesity. But I think I had to learn to allow myself to, until things got super stressful, and then I was just a disaster. But I was accepting of the fact that like I needed the meal, I needed what I needed and I just had to like put fat loss and nutrition to the side, and mentally, if I needed something, I just allowed myself to have it because that was the only way I was going to get through certain setbacks. And then with the sensitivity setbacks, that one wasn't as difficult because it just made me feel so bad that I would be in bed for 24 hours after eating a pizza. But if I knew, if it was stress related, I would allow myself the time, and I would plan for like, okay, Saturday, I'm just going to eat what I need to eat, feel better, feel sorry for myself, and then move on. Because if you're having a setback, it really doesn't help anything to just sit and panic and worry for hours on end, and then you're still going to do it anyways, but do it worse.
So essentially like wiping the slate clean, right? Like you can be in a really shitty place, like you can feel terrible, and we all have bad days and bad weeks and bad months, but if you kind of let that turn into this negative spiral of just like, what's the point? Why am I doing this? I think throughout your entire, it's been a couple of months, right? Like through this sticky spot but you've always had a really firm foundation with this healthy relationship with food that we had some time to work on last year. And so that's always sort of been the foundation that you've rested on. Yeah, we've had some like not great weeks, and you've managed to still wipe the slate clean every time and say, all right, like here we go, setbacks.
Like a start over. It's a move on.
Next step. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's the only advice I would have. Just like, the world is not ending if you have your Friday night pizza or whatever. Like, you'll be okay.
And essentially, I think, Hannah, like what you're describing is the opposite of all or nothing thinking, right? So diet mindset is like, I have the pizza, I'm bad. That was bad. Like now it's over. I might as well eat whatever I want and start again on Monday. And I think it sounds like what you're saying is like, make the pizza a part of the plan, like have it, enjoy it, and then just move on. Like that's just life. It's not falling off any wagon. It's not having to start over again. You're just taking it one step at a time.
Yeah. And like, you can still be a social human. I also found that to be difficult at first, but either eat before, or also with having to be low FODMAP, which is gluten-free, lactose-free, plus all of my triggers. Restaurants are not easy, but if you're able to maintain the like iron fist of this is how I'm going to eat because I want to eat like this and I don't want to feel bad, or for me, I don't want to die and have an IBS explosion in the middle of a restaurant. You just have to like own it, and this is, yeah, you have to own it and say this is what I'm doing. All or nothing has really burned me in the past.
I think you've come a long way with that. And I think big point of what you just mentioned is that you have to learn how to be your own advocate. So it was always a priority to you to still be able to go out with friends, with family, have like a meal, a social function, and enjoy your life while still making progress. And I think obviously that's absolutely possible, but it does require you to be the consumer and maybe make a couple of changes to whatever it is that's on the menu or what's being offered, or even if that's just like portion size, but you have to be your own advocate because the rest of the world, they do not want you to succeed, but it's powerful if you can stand up for yourself. So Hannah, tell us, you've learned a great deal about carbohydrates. We've had a minor bump in the road, but you still have this strong relationship with food throughout it all. So you're ready to like hit the ground running. Tell us what's next, like what's on the horizon for you? What goal are you shooting for? Summer is coming. What's going to happen?
Oh man, my goal at the moment is to figure out how to effectively carb cycle with a low FODMAP diet. Because that sounds tricky and slightly unappealing, but now that certain things in my life are done completely and like totally stress is gone, I have the time and I have the ability to invest in that like I had over the summer. And to eat the diet I eat and do the cycle that I love to freaking do. I can only imagine I'm going to just feel like a superstar Wonder Woman.
So Hannah, I think I'm thinking back to our conversation. I don't think we described what carb cycling is. So describe to someone who, I said earlier, it's an aggressive strategy. It's not for everyone. It's only if you've got the basics down, right? But tell us, what does carb cycling look like?
So you basically have the amount of carbs you need in a day, but you pack it around your workout. So I work out in the morning, so I don't eat before, but if you were to eat before, so for me, if I were to eat before, it'd be 40 grams before, an hour and a half before, then work out. And then post-workout meal would also have 40 grams. And then lunch would usually have 30, snack 20 grams, and then dinner 15 to 10 grams, which is like a mini, like inside of palm right here amount of food. Then your energy is boosted all around your workout. And then also throughout the day, it was like the only time in my life where I was like, oh, I don't need a nap when I'm doing this, or I'm not totally exhausted, because I'm a big napper. Um, but yeah, so it uses all the energy just in the most effective way possible.
Yeah, so essentially it's giving you the energy when you're most active throughout your day. So for people who aren't tracking grams, like 1 cup handful or 1 serving is like 20 grams. That's like an apple or a piece of bread or a half a cup of rice. So for you, and you were consistently active, right? So we had already figured out exactly how many carbs your body would thrive off of. We packed pre-workout, if applicable, post-workout, and then as you got less active throughout the day, basically your carbohydrate needs lessened as well. So for most people, we don't even need to get there in order to reach their goals. But you were going from lean to I want to be extra lean, which is a super cool place to be. And I know we'll get you back there. But what would you say to someone who's trying to get a serving of carbs at most meals? So let's say they're still on like, how can I get the basics of macronutrients down? Coming from a perspective where maybe they're afraid of carbohydrates, perhaps even like restricting them, and then on the weekends binging on things like pizza or cocktails or things that obviously are carbohydrates but not smart carbs. Do you have any suggestions for how someone could incorporate a serving of smart carbs into their breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
I started turning sweet potato into like toasts. So I would treat it like toast and like put pesto on it. And pre-lactose intolerant, I'd do like pesto and feta, which is bomb on a sweet potato that's been toasted. Um, I I'm an odd one, but I would totally recommend that everyone do something I don't do, which is eat the rice that you make for the week. Eat the leftover rice or quinoa or whatever. And breakfast. What other carbs do I eat at breakfast? Sometimes I just like I do make aggressive like veggie scrambles, and I just make sure I have sweet potato, or I really like rice in my eggs as well, so I would add that. But I found it generally pretty easy and cheap. I felt carbs are the easiest and cheapest thing to sort
Yeah.
of keep track of, and then also if you're like eating slowly, there's really only so much sweet potato you want to put in your body anyways.
And I think too, like sometimes we just don't realize how many carbs we're taking in as it is. So if we're putting sugar in our coffee and then we're having pancakes for breakfast or oatmeal, which is great, that's a smart carb, but it's still a carb. And then for lunch, we're having a sandwich with 2 pieces of bread. And then we're having a side of like potato chips, or even if it's fruit, that's another carb. And then at dinner, if we have pasta, or if we have something like a baked potato, that's another carb. So they just add up quickly. And for those of us who are less active, we don't need them as much. So I think it does take a little fine tuning to figure out how much your body needs and what that looks like in a given day. But based on your experience, I hear you saying you wouldn't recommend avoiding carbs or eliminating carbs in order to reach your fat loss goal.
No. And I did that while I was figuring out my food sensitivities, because I was literally eating nothing. I just get so sick, and I had no energy. I was sleeping all day. I can do anything without 1 to 2 naps a day, and I had no motivation, no like wanting to do life. And I was eating like no carbs, and I would have like a piece of plain protein at dinner, and that was like it. So even through that, I noticed the importance of carbs because you need that energy. Carbs are friends, not foe.
Yes, couldn't agree more. I think right now there's this major low carb trend with keto and similar diets. And there's this thing called like the keto flu, right? So when you initially start these diets, you feel like crap, essentially. And everyone's like, oh, that's normal. It should happen. Nope, it shouldn't happen. It's really just your body's way of saying like, this is not ideal. I don't love this.
This is not how I'm supposed to function.
And I think we do it in the name of fat loss. And I know a lot of women in the Facebook group, they desperately want to be in a smaller body, whether it's because they truly feel like they would be more confident in a smaller body, or because diet culture tells them that they should be in order to increase their self-worth. It's a combination, and sometimes they're very convoluted. But I think we do these things because we're desperate and we see it works really well for someone else. And when we go low carb, we know the scale drops because we're eliminating carbs, and carbs are a lot of water. So then we lose a lot of water weight. So the scale always goes down on low carb, but it's not fat loss. And I know throughout your fat loss journey, we have looked beyond the scale because sometimes that number doesn't move or doesn't move a whole lot or it goes in the wrong direction. And we have to have some other metric in order to measure your progress because the scale is just, it doesn't ever tell the full picture. So just talk a little bit about that. I know this wasn't part of our planned discussion, but on your fat loss journey, like what else did you use aside from the scale in order to gauge your progress?
Photographs.
Progress photos. Did you find those to be helpful?
Probably the most helpful thing, because I also have a scale that tells me my fat percentage, which that was nice to see that make major jumps this past summer. And then like the measurements, but the photos were definitely, because everyone looks at pictures of themselves more often than they're looking at their fat percentage scale, and like looking at pictures of yourself and actually liking it is kind of a fun feeling. But yeah, the photos definitely. And then also because I was lifting, the number really wasn't moving ever. But to see that there was actual physical change with my body was, and to put the before and after pictures like from Weight Watchers was really cool.
Yes.
Also motivating.
You have like some of the best before and afters I've ever seen. And I think it just goes to show that someone could be making amazing progress, but they're looking at that number on the scale and they're disappointed with what they're seeing. Because like you said, sometimes your number didn't move a whole lot because you're really active. You were, doing all of the right things. And at the end of the day, what does the scale or measurements even mean to you, right? Like we associate that number going down with being a good thing. But if you're able to look at your body and love what you see, or love how, I know crop tops were like a huge win for you, right? Like I want to confidently wear a crop top, and last summer that happened. I think those things mean more because they're more valuable. They're more real life.
Yeah. Yeah, you're not like sitting at a table like, oh, my neck is now this. Actually, I super was like that because I'm like really into neck loss, but that's not a normal conversation.
I think all progress is worth celebrating. I just support over and over and over again. You need more than one metric. You need more than just the scale. And your progress photos, maybe when I share this video in our Facebook group, I'll put it in the comments because it was just so amazing. And I know we're going to get you back there now that we've got all of this food sensitivity stuff figured out. We're ready to tackle carbohydrates again.
No humps in the near future.
Correct. Onwards and upwards.